Time no speak. So it's been 3 months since my last stream. Sorry, loves. I thought I was getting better. I worked really hard, and I've now had another bout of pneumonia and a bout of bronchitis. And Smalls had a bout of bronchitis, and pretty much it's been a bit shit. But I'm back to read you some lovely things, and I'm really looking forward to sharing with you today some of my favourite bits and pieces from Dry Humpalooza, which is a Raylo fandom event. And I'm going to open up with one by my dear friend Dampier Drink Espresso, and it's called Char-CUTE-erie Girl, and it is from the Char-CUTE-erie universe. For those of you who aren't aware, that's Clyde Logan from Logan Lucky and Ophelia from Ophelia. So kind of Raylo adjacent. And Char-CUTE-erie Girl is an Omegaverse story, so please be aware of the tags. That's Alpha, Beta, Omega Dynamics, Alpha Clyde, Omega Phi, Fingering, Breakthrough Heat, Meet Cute, Char-CUTE-erie Girl Phi, Human Charcuterie Board, Dubious Consent, Pool Table Sex, Mating Instincts, Cunnilingus, Notting, Strangers to Lovers. Scared somebody away already. Omega Phi works for Gertrude's event planning business. When she accepts extra pay to work a party as a human charcuterie board. It's not your fault. You are the reason it's different. Dampier says, it's my fault. It's not your fault. You're just lovely. I do apologise in advance, Dampier. My voice is not what it should be. So, Omega Phi works for Gertrude's event planning business. When she accepts extra pay to work a party as a human charcuterie board, she doesn't realise just what she's gone into. And Omegaverse, meet cute. Meet cute, even. There was bacon dip in her belly button. And something in her head. Pimento cheese, maybe? Hard to say. She tried not to squirm. Told herself again, unconvincingly, that she likes the smell of stale beer sweat and cured meats, pretzel salt and cracker crumbs bit into her ass. Her left calf twinged with the looming threat of a cramp. Who knew lying on her back without moving could be so difficult? It certainly never seemed like at the end of a passable date, although she usually couldn't wait for that to end either. She wrinkled her nose and tried to pretend she couldn't hear the things being said about her. The comments on her body and her career choice. As if she could just pick and choose her work assignments and still pay the bills. Worse still, when they spotted the glands on her neck, arms and legs. She'd gotten pretty good at tuning it out since arriving and finding out her understanding of the job, what she'd actually been signed up to do, were very different. Truthfully, she was accustomed to trying not to listen to such things in general. Trying. Phi walked into the duct tape bar and grill expecting the normal NSOR events Char-CUTE-erie Girl shtick. Slip into an opaque body stocking, an appropriately sized bikini, lie on a table with trays and platters of charcuterie and crudité balanced on around her, get paid double time to essentially do nothing. Instead, after she agreed, the owner of the event planning business she for some reason still worked for, even though her breakup with said owner's son had been extremely messy, that owner had slapped her bum and told her to get moving before she missed a waxing appointment. She'd been so startled she simply obeyed, not even questioning why until it arrived tonight at the address provided, and Gert handed her something in a sandwich bag and a box of antibacterial wipes. A bachelor party on some big sporting event weekend? Too late for football, right? Basketball, maybe? Or racing? Golf? Anyway, some kind of championship weekend, and she was working a bachelor party at a bar. At least all the guests seemed to be betas. The guests, but not... Well, it could be hard to tell sometimes, but as soon as the scent of the most delicious alpha hit her. She would have argued. Would have. She opened her mouth to try, and then she saw the bartender, and suddenly found herself distracted enough for a Boston manhandled her into the office, where she was instructed to strip bare, apply pasties and sticky modesty shields, and a sticky modesty shield patch thing from the sandwich baggie, and was wiped down head to toe with food-safe disinfectant wipes that smelt faintly of vinegar and fake lemons. She should have left. She didn't. So there she was, one Ophelia Larson, Omega, practically naked, laid out on a tarp-covered pool table, with all sorts of crackers, meats and cheeses on her body, directly on her skin. It could not be sanitary, disinfectant or no. What about temperature control, sweat, other substances? And then there was her other little problem. She closed her eyes, tried to calm the raging flutter at her pulse, the echoing throb lower. She breathed too deeply, and another stuffed olive rolled down her side to land on the table. She tried not to shift about restlessly, but the bowl of bean dip balanced on the crux of her thighs and pressing worryingly close to the glands there, wobbled. "Are you still okay, miss, ma'am?" She wasn't supposed to interact, really. But she wasn't supposed to be in her current situation anyway. She turned her head and, oh, right there, kneeling by the table, hot bartender, Alpha. "Fine," she said, but even to her own ears it didn't sound believable, breathy and strained, wobbly as the bowl on her thighs. "Ain't," he said with a frown, voice soft and low only for her ears, a whimper stuck in her throat, a fluttery, needy sound there fighting to be free. He was close enough he must have seen the beads of sweat along her hairline. His nostrils flared. She felt the twin burn of need and shame as a drop of slick slipped out and crawled along the cleft between her cheeks to join the pool beneath her. His lips parted, eyes dilating until that lovely honeyed whiskey colour of his iris was swallowed by darkness. The whimper escaped her. "Closing time. Everybody out." There was swearing, yelling, the thunder of footsteps, but the Alpha just ignored them, busy removing bowls and platters from her body, peeling stray salami and pepperoni off of the slight swell of her tummy. She actually moaned in relief when the bowl on her thighs was lifted away. One of the patrons, the best man if she was recalling correctly, grabbed the Alpha bartender's shoulder and attempted to turn him around. Instead, he just rocked slightly on his feet and stiffened, lip curling as a low, warning growl rumbled from his throat, a barrel-chested echo that made her whine in distressed response. He turned his head slowly until he could see the threat behind him. "Said we're closed. Get out." She had the impression of movement. And Alpha was gone, walking the man to the door, shoving him to the porch, the others still swearing in protest as they filed out. Apparently most of the party had more sense than to tangle with a territorial Alpha. She listened as the door closed with a thump, the sound for bolts sliding home, echoing more clearly than it should with the jukebox and the television still blaring. Likewise, she shouldn't have been able to hear the rasp of his steps, the faint thump of boot heels, soft. But she could. The last dip bowls were lifted away. Fee hissed in relief. "I got you, darling. You're gonna be okay," the Alpha murmured, sliding an arm under her back. She groaned as he helped her sit up, stiff from lying on the uncomfortable surface of the pool table. The inflatable neck pillow Gertrude stuck under her head had a slow leak, which had got considerably less slow as soon as her boss left, and her hips ached from the stiff way she'd had to hold her legs. Knees locked to keep the dips from slipping down between her thighs rather than resting atop them. Normally they use trays with stands, more cushions. Had a spotter on hand. Fee should have been more suspicious when she was given the job rather than one of the slimmer girls on staff. But Gert was a master of handling people, and the promise of extra pay was too much to resist. She opened her mouth to thank the Alpha, but instead a startled yip slipped out as the Alpha slipped his other arm under her legs, tugged her against his torso. His arm was oddly hard, shockingly cool against her heated skin. She sighed and tucked her head beneath his chin as he lifted her off the table. Strong. She closed her eyes as he carried her away. Probably to the office where she'd undressed, but she didn't really care as long as he was there. She pressed her nose to the base of his neck and breathed deeply. Hello, Celestia Ludenberg. Pulling his scent into her lungs. Oh, darling, don't do that, he said, stumbling and then quickening his pace, heedless of anything but his scent. Fee nuzzled the Alpha's throat, tongue darting out almost as an afterthought as he carried her into the office. Shit. Fee shrieked as she landed on the old sagging sofa with a bounce. Oh, hell, sorry, you okay? He backed into the doorway, facing stubbornly away from her. Fine. Fuck, he muttered, standing up in the doorway facing out. She watched his right hand curl into a fist, squeezing so tight a tremor ran up his arm. I ain't... An annoyed rumble left him and he whirled around, crossing the small space in 2 steps, sinking to the floor beside the couch. He grabbed a soft blanket off the back of the sofa and draped it over her. Nothing more than I want to lock myself in here with you and see you through. You don't even know me. And it ain't right. I gotta rub the kitchen emergency supplies, blockers, suppressants, sunblock, whole deal. Please understand. She nodded, even though it felt like some part of her was about to burst forth from her chest with a primal scream. Good. That's good. You stay here, okay? Yes, Alpha, she whispered, and he winced, freezing in a crouch before slowly standing. He backed away if he couldn't look away from the bulge in his pants. She licked her lips, and he moved faster, pausing only to grab the doorknob. Ophelia, she said suddenly, tilting her chin. They will call me Fee. Clyde, he said with a nod, still not looking back at her, and then he pulled the door firmly closed behind him. With a little distance and the door closed between them, she could almost think again. The blanket draped over her was clean, smelling mostly of detergent and dryer sheets. But there was an ingrained note of Alpha in the soft fabric. She hugged it tight to her and tried to breathe. No cramping yet, but her body temperature was higher than normal and climbing. She didn't have long. Fee struggled to her feet, blanket still wrapped around her, and gave in to the urge to hold the fabric over her nose and breathe deeply, greedily drinking in the ghost of his scent. Just that eased her, relaxed sore muscles, and banished some of the anxiety threatening to settle over her like a shroud. Alpha was right, they weren't thinking clearly. What had she been doing instead of bedding down and nesting in a bar? It wasn't a proper nest at all, no. They needed a den. Somewhere warm and safe, bathed in their scents, and Fee shook her head. That wasn't helping. She ground her teeth together, trying to quiet that insistent little voice, made up of all her baser instincts. She walked shakily to the little desk and retrieved her bag from the surface, digging through it and then upending it in frustration. Her cell phone was dead, no charger, and her emergency suppressor injector was expired and worryingly cloudy. She dropped it in a small waste bin and covered her face with her hands. Alpha. Clyde. He said there were emergency suppressants in the kitchen. She seemed to be referring to a first aid kit, which made sense. Most businesses had to have them. Surely, if he was going for the rut break kit, he considered this enough of an emergency, he'd give her the suppressants, no matter how expensive they were. She'd figure out how to pay him back later. He pulled the blanket more tightly around her shoulders and tucked her face down, shuffling to the door and taking care not to trip over the fabric. She made her way down the narrow hallway and stepped into the main room of the bar proper and froze. A large emergency first aid kit lay upended, contents strewn about the floor, and Clyde was leaning over the pool table, tarp kind of bundled at the edges, and his face down low. Slick slipped past the sticky patch and trailed down her leg. Fee dropped to the blanket and reached down, tugging the stubborn thing free with the help of her own wetness. Clyde moved, rolling his eyes up and watching her as he slowly licked again at the pool of slick she'd left on the tarp. The modesty shield fluttered to land on top of the rumpled blanket, and Fee scurried across to the pool table, picking and plucking at the pasties on her aching nipples as she moved. She hissed as the left one stubbornly pulled at the skin before it came free, and then rubbed at her breast as Clyde met her. His mouth was hot, surprisingly soft, and his facial hair tickled and prickled her skin in the most wonderful way. He picked her up again, lifting her up onto the pool table and shoving her legs wide. She reached for his jeans, fumbling at the belt, rubbing the pulsing hard length through the heavy denim. He growled a warning, nipping at her lower lip as he pulled free of her kisses. Omega. Alpha? You don't want me. She nuzzled the warm fabric covering his chest. I can't assure you I do. She jerked his shirt free where it was tucked in, sliding her hands under the fabric and moaning at the first press of his skin. My arm. She kissed the harsh plastic of the prosthetic hand, trailing her mouth up to where it met skin, and kissed him there too. All right, Albert.
Ain't no Omega wants a broken alpha,
he said, almost as if reciting something he'd memorized long ago. Fee grabbed his right hand, placing it on her breast as she went back to work at his pants, hissing through the pain as the first wave of cramps seized her. He steadied her as she panted, fresh sweat popping out on her forehead, more slick gushing out to pool beneath her, pushed down by the spasms. She leaned into his touch, let his presence soothe her as she tried to remember. Good thing you ain't broken then. He opened his mouth to argue, but she turned her attention back to his pants. It hurts, Alpha, she complained, patting up at him as she pushed heavy denim down his thighs and grasped his cock. She stroked him, and he grabbed her hip, fingers digging into a bit as she worked her hand up and down his length, thumb pressing at the little ridge where his knot would pop. His mouth latched onto her neck, sucking and licking at the skin just shy of her mating gland. She grabbed his hand, guided it to her left breast, and moaned as he immediately tweaked her nipple between thumb and forefinger, grunting when her fingers flexed around him reflexively.
So fucking perfect,
he murmured, trailing kisses down between her breasts and thrusting lightly into her hand. His mouth found her right nipple, hands still playing at the right. He licked and sucked and plucked and massaged until she whined and writhed on the table. He chuckled, called her a good girl, and closed his lips over her nipple as his fingers slipped over her mound, playing the slick there on her thighs, teasing, then finally circling around and over her clit as she threw her head back and moaned. Clyde pulled off her nipple with a pop, then kissed her again, pushed her lightly against his shoulder with his left hand. She shivered at the difference in temperature, maybe moaned again because it was a nice contrast. She lay back and Clyde hooked his arms under her knees, tugging her forward to the lip, or whatever they called it, the raised edge of the table. Fee wailed and kicked, threading her fingers through his hair as he took a deep, huffing breath and licked her, tongue dragging slowly and collecting the slick from her skin, tracing her outer labia and the crease of each thigh before making each pass right up her centre, nose and tongue teasing her folds and tracing her clit. You might have given her 2 right breasts. I am not ignoring you, Celestial. We're going to get through this story and then I will go and read your Simpsons fic, I swear. Yeah, there are definitely a confusing number of nipples. Normally it's the hands you have a hard time, like people have a hard time keeping out, like, track of in Clyde fics. Not additional nipples. Maybe she's got an extra nipple. I'm not going to judge her for that. Everyone has their quirks. Not canon that she doesn't. He huffed a laugh, and she felt as much as heard when he placed a light teasing kiss just above her clit. She squealed, "Alfred, please." He did it again, then nudged her clit with his nose and pressed his tongue inside her. She would have been hard-pressed to say which of them moaned the loudest as he licked and slurped her slick. She squealed again when he replaced his tongue with 2 fingers, something hard pressing just outside her entrance. He crooked his fingers and sucked her clit. Fee couldn't help but rock against him, riding his face and fingers as he pushed her to the edge and sent her sailing over. She was blinking away starburst when she felt the first hot, teasing glide of his cock over her. And never in her life had she ever expected to be grateful for a full waxing, but she felt everything, every ridge and vein, the velvet stroke and glide of the head along her labia to butt against her clit. She blinked again and his face came into focus, fingers in his mouth as he licked and sucked her slick from his skin. A heavy silver ring, shaped like a horseshoe, shone in the light, and she recalled the hard press against her. Fee braced her feet on the edge of the pool table, lifting her hips in a wordless request. Clyde braced his left arm with a prosthetic hand on the table beside her, gripping his cock with the right to line them up. And she gasped at the stretch of the head of his cock pressed inside her. He paused, looked at her face. She nodded, eyes rolling back into her head as he thrust forward a bit more. She managed to lock one leg around him, and he took it as a sign, the sign it was to move, thrusting further into her and pulling back agonizingly slowly. She moaned and bucked, chasing after him as he pulled almost all the way out and then thrust in again. Fee scrubbed at the top and felt a table beneath her, arched her back, and then Clyde began fucking her in earnest, hard and fast, until she was actually sliding a little on the table with every thrust. Fee plucked and pinched her nipples, sweat and slick pooling and spreading beneath her. Clyde managed to press his thumb against her clit, and she came hard, screaming up at the suspended light fixture over the pool table. Clyde grunted, thrusts a little erratic. Then, pulling all the way out again, she opened her mouth to protest, but could only gasp and moan as he rolled her over and thrust in again, hitting the same spot he did with his fingers earlier. "Not you, just like this," he muttered, fingers massaging her mating gland. "My Omega, so fucking good." He pressed her mating gland again, and Fee clenched around him, inner wall spasming in the best way. His thrusts grew shorter. Noises he made more animalistic and from deeper in his chest, as she felt the pressure of his expanding knot catching just right. He fumbled, fingers searching at her clit again as he bent over her, almost but not quite on top of her. "Come for me, Omega," he muttered, and she did, fluttering, clenching for what seemed an impossible long time, as he moaned against her shoulder and bit down, pinching the skin just to the side of her mating gland, but not hard enough to draw blood. She shuddered with the aftershocks, as she felt him twitch and pulse inside her, rocking gently as he licked the edges of her gland. She tried not to give in to the instinctive urge to beg, to ask him to mate her, biting at the inside of her cheek to hold back. "Shit," he muttered. "Should have moved us." She giggled, making Clyde moan and rock against her. "I'm fine like this," she said, although truthfully the table was digging into her in a way more likely to cause her cramps to return ahead of schedule. "Sorry about this," he said. "I dropped the blockers. Damn injector rolled under the pool table, and then I could smell you again, like fucking candy." "Oh." "Yeah." He pressed a kiss to the back of her neck. "I'm not," she said. "Sorry, I mean." "Ain't sorry some strange alpha you don't know has you knotted on a filthy pool table." "Not really. Worse ways to meet a mate." He froze, tense. She shocked him.
"Mate?"
"Isn't that what a breakthrough heat is about? I've never had one before now." She sighed. "I suppose I'm being childish, fanciful. All those fairy stories of fate mates and destiny, happily ever after, as told me as a child. Sometimes I get lonely, and it's nice to think."
"Yeah."
he whispered, trembling.
"Yeah, I get it."
"Clyde,
"Mm."
when your knot goes down, are you gonna run? Be done with me?"
"I don't think I will."
"That's good," she hummed sleepily. "I'd like to know you properly." She fell asleep, oddly hopeful for someone with sandwich bread in her hair, knotted to a virtual stranger. She knew he'd still be there when she woke. Maybe next time they could do this in a bed. I love them so much, and it's definitely the opening of a story, in my opinion. But I said that in my comment. I love it. I don't care how many nipples she has. My brain can. She has a third nipple. It's just the law. Right, Ludenberg, you have been incredibly patient. You're playing Simpsons Hit and Run. The vehicles are divided into 4 stat speeds. Acceleration's toughness. And each one max it. You just maxed out all the stats except toughness. That's awesome. I just don't think it's so wrong that she had an extra right nipple, but okay. Right. Was it? Right. For context, in November of 23, the Simpsons writers made a Treehouse of Horror episode that had a segment called 8th, where Sideshow Bob kills Bart during the Cape Fear time period from season 5, and in this fic, Lisa has a nightmare based on that segment. Okay. Simpsons voices. It's been a while. Cowabunga. And I can do a pretty mean Marge. My Marge is pretty good. He remains a Simpson man. The Simpsons and Disney villains victorious, gridlocked crossover. So the summary, let's double check. I'm trusting you that you have permission for this. So sibling bonding, dreams and nightmares, alternate universe, canon divergence, crossovers, and fandom fusions. I'm just going to have a sip of my ginger. I have a feeling this is going to be a little bit rough on my throat. I'm just going to share what we're about to read. Have you got a Twitter handle, Lindenberg, that you want me to share this under? So, no worries. Just I put a shout out on Twitter to as what we're reading. So, but yeah, if you drop your YouTube handle, then I will credit you. When this episode goes up on YouTube. So, to be warned for anybody who is not watching this live, this is a cold read, so please bear with me. He remains a Simpson man, the Simpsons and Disney villains' victorious gridlock crossover. Suffering from horrible nightmares in the wake of Sideshow Bob escaping from prison, young Lisa Simpson opens her heart to her brother she has begun to grow apart from over the maddening monotony of life. After gaining knowledge of how the most recent Treehouse of Horror special used classic canon Simpsons episode Cape Fear as a vehicle to explore a what-if scenario where Bob killed Bart during the climax of the episode, I got inspired of how to wedge the concept into a Hellfish Files again, a Simpsons DVV gridlock crossover quest on a sufficient velocity I'm part of. For those of you that don't know, DVV stands for Disney Villains Victorious, a fan-made mega crossover on the internet where pretty much all of the various villains from Disney properties won their respective stories, took over, and now are smashed together to vie for dominance, where any remaining heroes pick up the pieces and try to carry on now. Gridlock specifically focuses on all the more modern villains, like Syndrome and Dr. Doomfenshmirtz, living in a Shadowrun-like world of intrigue. Hellfish add The Simpsons to the mix and centres around a world where a few weeks after the events of the Simpsons movie, Abe Simpson manages to win a poker match against Mr. Burns, with the prize being all of Burns' properties. Now Abe has effectively taken control of his hometown in a world where shady CEOs of several mega corporations have built their own little secret fiefdoms all across a ravaged United States. And the federal government is trying to hang on for dear life while keeping everything under wraps from the public eye. Of course, I couldn't truly fit the premise of Bob kills Bart during the climax of Cape Fear as is into a story where Bart is still very much alive. So I decided to have Lisa suffer from periodic nightmares based on the 8th segment from the Treehouse of Horror 35 in the wake of Bob escaping from prison instead. There's a link in the document to get to some of this. This is some fascinating world building, my friend. For the umpteenth night since the prison escape by one Robert Underlunk Terwilliger, more commonly known as Sideshow Bob, 8-year-old Lisa Marie Simpson was tossing and turning in her fitful sleep as the memories of that fateful Tuesday night so long ago invaded her dreams. The houseboat of the Thompson family ploughed onwards in its journey along the river betwixt Terror Lake and Springfield, its inhabitants tied up like Christmas roast. Hearing a ruckus from the bow, little Lisa resolved herself to at least attempt to do something about her predicament.
And it's clearly to his credit that he is an English man. Don't give me this stuff unless you want to hear me sing. Sorry, babe.
Underscored by the maniac's admittedly sonorous timbre, she flopped onto her belly and crawled toward the seats next to the steering wheel, coming to a stop on top of them just as he started reaching his performance's crescendo.
He remains an English.
Suddenly the madman halted, as if realization had struck his crazed brain at last. Oh no, Lisa thought to herself, has he seen me?
Wait, did you only ask me to sing to forestall your gruesome end?
He bit out with a growl and murderous hatred in his eyes, and right there in the middle of it all, without a care for the world, Lisa's brother Bart lounged on a deck chair with a playbill he must have produced from Buddha knows where in hand. Chuckling along at having won over his foe's supposedly superior intellect, Bart responded smugly, "Guilty as charged." Proud of his own bravado. Bart did not see him bearing down until it was too late, and so Lisa could only scream in absolute horror as the monster hacked her beloved older brother to bits. Gallons of blood flying everywhere amidst Bart's gurgling death cries. Ah! Only a moment after Lisa had startled wide awake from her recurring nightmare, Bart pushed open the bedroom door, a steaming cup of cocoa in hand. "Hey, Lise," he chided his sister good-naturedly. "Maybe keep it down. Mom might want to sleep a bit over Homer's snoring, you know?" You okay? Seeing Lisa trembling and dry-heaving like a crazy shook Bart out of his mirth enough to wake up his long-dormant brotherly instincts a bit. But even so, he was not prepared for the words that left Lisa's mouth next. "Bart, you're alive?" "What? Of course I am alive. Lisa, why wouldn't I? What the hell?" Next thing Bart knew, his sister all but launched himself at him, hugging him hard enough to make his ribs crack and protesting and snot crying all over his shoulders, making him drop his cocoa on the floor and spilling it all over the carpets. Thank God, you're alive." Freaking out at Lisa behaving like that, Bart finally managed to untangle himself from his troubled sister, shook her hard to get her out of her funk. "Okay, now you're really freaking me out, sis. What's going on? What's this about me being dead? Please make it make sense again, Lisa." After a bit more heavy breathing and sobbing, Lisa was finally able to compose herself enough to explain, her eyes still bloodshot from crying. Do you remember the time when Sideshow Bob hunted you down and we had to flee to Terror Lake?" "You mean where I tricked him into singing the entire score of HMS Pinafore to stall enough time for that our boat would return to Springfield and get him arrested by Bart smirked, mentally reliving one of his finest victories over that self-obsessed blowhard. "Sure do, Lise. Well, I love it." "Never got to tell you this back then, but I actually had been watching him bearing down on you from the cabin window before the boat hit those rocks." "Oh, dang, Lise. I didn't know I was having an audience while getting Bob to make another fool out of it. That's so cool." "No, that's not cool," Lisa yelled. I hope you can still hear me, because my sound equipment just made a horrible cracking noise. "Do you have any idea how close to getting murdered you got there? What if Bob had refused your final request and just gone for the kill? What if Wiggum hadn't been there, instead of lazing around like he always does? What if the boat had not crashed just in time? What if... steadying her frantic breathing again. Lisa aired her deepest fears about that night to her brother. What if me snooping around had tipped off Bob that something was wrong and got him to cut things short there and then? And for a while, Bart just stood there, lost for words, allowing his sister to press on. That's what I've been having nightmares about after Pop broke out of prison. Bart, the idea that my only brother might have died back then and it could have been my fault. That isn't the worst of it. Sometimes the nightmare continues and I grow up into a serial killer even worse than Bob, just to get into his prison cell and butcher him like he did to you. Just as Lisa started spiraling into self-loathing over those times with her nightmare self ended up butchering so many of her former schoolmates in the most gruesome ways imaginable, just so she would be able to ambush Bob in his cell for bloody revenge. She felt her brother squeezing her tightly, bringing her back to the here and now. It's okay, Lise. I'm here, but damn, I never thought you'd actually care about me being gone. Utterly flabbergasted by her brother's admission, Lisa couldn't stop herself from slapping Bart before returning to hug him even harder. Of course I'd care if you're gone, you idiot. Yeah, sometimes you can be obnoxious and crude and just plain mean-spirited buffoon. I can almost understand why Dad keeps strangling you, but you're still my brother, and I love you. What in Buddha's name makes you think I wouldn't? Let's be honest, Lise. I never amounted to anything in my life, and I never will. With how things are going, sure, I try to apply myself, but still got enough for my troubles. I remember that one baseball game just a few weeks before the whole dumb mess with the dome, where I flipped the catch. The entire damn town kept dumping on me until I tried to freaking kill myself, and a bit later the same dirtbags kicked us out of town just because Homer had to dump his pig crap in the lake. Before you say something, I know you guys rigged the next match to make me feel better. I'm not that dumb. That's when I realized I'm just a worthless idiot who'll be lucky if he ends up a trash tier rock guitarist instead of only a male stripper. And that's why I keep bugging guys like Homer, Skinner, or even Bob, because then I can finally win for once. Composing himself for a bit, Bart continued his self-loathing tirade. And then, take a look at yourself in comparison, Lise. You are crazy smart. Get enough guts to tell Mom off from bugging you about boring church every Sunday by switching to this Buddhist stuff. I don't even get it in the first place. You guys, you've get folks to actually listen to you. You can make changes in the world around you because you believe you can do it. Honestly, you don't need your big brother anymore. And you once adored me to enough that I was your first word, damn it. What are you talking about, Bart? Lisa couldn't help but yell at her brother incredulously at the sheer amount of hatred he was leveling at himself just now. You've got loads of talents as well. You're an incredible drummer. You can dance gracefully while I am prone to pratfalling. You were able to learn several languages like it was nothing. You got away with animals and even people in a way you managed to legally obtain a driver's license. You always find a way to just have fun. And let's be honest, you're just a worthless idiot. You wouldn't have been able to repeatedly outsmart someone as wicked cultured as Sideshow Bob. Before Bart could reject his sister's praises, Lisa pressed on by airing her own inward frustrations. Speaking of Bob, and speaking of me being crazy smart, for all my smarts, I never was able to take him on my lonesome, unlike you. And with speaking for being the ignorance-ridden cesspit that it is, all my socially conscious acts are for naught when no one ever takes me seriously and just makes me so angry with them sometimes. You know, I try to be a good person, but sometimes it doesn't seem enough. I have to be perfect, yet people just tell me to shut up. I feel just about ready to start splitting at the seams. Don't think about what your dream self on the shelf has done. Don't think about it. Lisa kept chanting mentally until she felt Bart's hand on her shoulders, looking into his eyes, full of saddened mirth. Jeez, Lise. Looks like we both got issues, huh? You, me, Mom, Dad. Honestly, all of Springfield feels like it's only been getting worse over time. Everyone just keeps getting dumber and lazier and more mean-spirited. Well, we're just dragging ourselves through life, do you know what I mean? Brow furrowed, his brother stated after some deliberation. Actually, Lise, I do. I don't know how, but it feels like the town has been pretty much reliving the same dumb, crappy day over and over again since forever. It's been dragging everyone down to the gutter. I know I've gotten nastier with my pranks over time. Just stop caring about how anyone else feels about them, including you. Because why should I give a damn? It doesn't seem to get punished for it in a permanent way. Just next day, even seemed kind of back to normal. Only even more crappy. Hugging her brother again, Lisa responded. Trust me, Bart, I know. I've been getting more and more high and mighty about my progressive views, less patient with other people's opinions, because nothing seemed to matter until recently. What do you mean, Lise? Like you said, it seems we've been essentially redoing the same day ad nauseum with nothing ever truly changing, and it's been getting on everyone's nerves, but recently. I don't know if it's Grandpa taking over the nuclear pan from that... I don't know if it was Grandpa taking over the nuclear plant from that fiend Burns, or if it was you and Dad blowing up Cargill's dome, or something else entirely, but things changed on a fundamental level. For us that shook Springfield out of its monotony. Now our lives can finally change, or have to, or else, no idea. But it scares me to never move on and just get worse again, Bart. No worries, Lise, Bart chuckled. I'm not going to let my little sister face whatever comes next alone. Now, we both know how much we mean to each other. What do you say, sis? I cover your back and you cover mine, so we don't have to go bad again, you know? Of course, Bart. I love you, my brother, and from now on, we'll tackle the world together. Both hugged each other for a bit before wet squelching alerted him to the mess at their feet, causing Bart to groan in annoyance. Oh, man. My cocoa. I just got Flanders mixed just right with the waffles and the marshmallows on top. Giggling at her brother's plight, Lisa smirked. Well, Bart, what do you think to us both getting some more hot chocolate together to celebrate our new pact? Sounds good, Lise, Bart responded before grinning, while the two of them started on their way to the kitchen. You know, Lise, as bad as your nightmare about Bob managing to kill me might have been, at least it had some use. What with us starting to be proper brother and sister again. Thanks to it, my nightmares are just plain weird crap. Like Homer's burps turning everyone except you, me, and Maggie into copies of him. But it preserve us. As much as I love Dad, that would be a horrible thing to happen. Ain't that the truth, Lise? Ain't that the truth? Unbeknownst to the two siblings going to get some late-night snacks. In their parents' bedroom, Homer and Marge were lying awake, having heard everything from their older daughter's blood-curdling scream, and becoming so very proud of both Bart and Lisa, having worked through the respective issues on their own whilst musing about those issues themselves, like proper parents should. As good as things went, homie, Marge said. We should still talk to our kids about it all. As a family. We are in it together, after all. Her husband nodded sleepily in agreement.
You're right, as always, Marge.
And with that, they both snuggled closer and drifted back to sleep.
That was a really cute one. That was a really interesting story, and I mean, this was supposed to be the smart reckoning, but bless you for coming into the chat, and you know where the Kofi is, my dude. Yeah, so that's a bit of a mood switch. What should we have next? Oh, I don't know what we fancy now. Alright, just let me update masses. I don't exist on doing this. Oh, my giddy aunt. Oh, I have to say, I'm very fond of you, my friend, but that was hard on the throat. Genuinely quite sore now. Oh, anybody got any easy ones for me? Oh. Some Ray Hucks, whatever they call that. I don't even know what they call that. Call that MK being lazy because there's no accents for her to doing those. Give me some Regency reads. Hit me up with a Regency read. I want to do something Regency. Oh, ow. I am the very model of a modern Major General. I don't actually want a Regency read. It's just because they've all got English accents. Oh, ow. All those Simpson voices are right here, and they got so much vocal fry. Ow. So I have a whole face and I didn't use enough emojis, so it's all good. Oh, so this is I know this looks really dodgy, but it's ginger. It's ginger tea. Oh. Bum 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 bum. Oh, wow, wow. Sometimes the tea can help, but it's going to take me a little bit to recover from that, my friend. Oh, that's sore. Oh, heal me with some porn. Let's have some dirt. What filth should we read? You know what I haven't read? I haven't read your Slinky one. Is Jen about? Can we check if it's alright? Ow. Trying not to get distracted, reading back through. Excuse me. All of your amazing stories. Be like, this is gonna be weird for people on the watch back. We sat here going, ow. I don't think that Blue-Eyed Girl is about for me to check if we can read that one, so I'll have to pick something else. Oh. Sorry. Just looking for something that hasn't got too many accents in it. You know what I'm going to read? I'm going to read the current last chapter of Punch It, which is my own story, because assuming my life does not explode any further, dear God, please, can my life not explode any further? Not only should there be a new... Oh, Jen says yes, then let's do that. Awesome. Yes. So Jen, I said thank you. So, Slinky Dinky for Blue-Eyed Girl and Dampier drinks espresso. Are we ready for this tag list? This is another Clydephilia story. Alternate universe, modern setting, crack treated seriously, weird biology, weird genitals, explicit sexual content, wet and messy, truly a lot of cum, enthusiastic blowjobs, for science, cunnilingus, vaginal fingering, penis and vagina sex, biting, insert late night masturbation noise here. We joined forces to make you scared but horny. We are dealing with science here. Everyone loves a slinky. Clyde Logan's funhouse genitals. Let him light the way. And they were roommates. Ribbed for her pleasure. Clyde, what's a refractory period? Logan, we were left unsupervised. Fee is curious about her roommate, Clyde Logan. Even more so after she accidentally walked in on him stepping out of the shower. What goes downstairs alone or in pairs? Fee'd been wondering about her roommate Clyde for some time. He had been hesitant for her to move in, but as time passed she realised it wasn't because he thought she was poor company, it was because he was painfully shy. She wondered if he'd even have let her live with him if the hours didn't differ so intensely. Her shifts at the library requiring her to get there early, while he closed the duct tape most nights. Sometimes it felt like there were ships passing in the night, barely ever seeing each other except for the occasional night off. When they did interact, Clyde was considerate and respectful. He was also surprisingly neat, cleaning up after himself, and admittedly sometimes after her, and keeping the cabinets in the refrigerator organised. They split the groceries, the cooking, the cleaning. Sometimes he helped her with laundry. Living with Clyde was possibly the most pleasant domestic experience Fee had ever had. The occasional late-night noises were odd, but not a deal-breaker. Just, she couldn't quite place them. The first time she heard it, she woke up in the middle of the night too hot, because the air conditioning needed charging after a coolant leak, and the humidity seemed to be winning the battle with the light breeze. She lay in bed, sticky with sweat, perhaps a bit grumpy about it, when she heard what sounded like a wheeze. No, more of a squeaking noise? Like a dog toy, but not, and there was this, rhythmic sort of sound. All she could think were, like, trading cards in bicycle spokes. when fans caught the blinds just right, sort of ruffled them all at once. Except it didn't sound like that. She wondered if it was one of those strange wind chime things hanging nearby. Not a chime exactly, like a pinwheel kind of thing. She was too tired to sort this out, let alone investigate. In any case, if it was a burglar, she's certain Clyde had sorted it out. Apparently the noise you're looking for is crochet hook on metal mesh pen holder. Did I in fact experiment trying to figure out what noise I could do for Foley for that? Yes, I did. She kicked off the covers and traded her old nightgown for a worn t-shirt of Clyde's, one she may or may not have stolen from the laundry, then lay with her head at the foot of her bed, closer to the window. Something squeaked again, and she really hoped the air conditioner repair could be completed tomorrow, so they could close the windows again. Except she heard the same sounds again the next night. Lower, slightly muted by the compressor. Maybe Clyde had some of those fidget toys for anxiety. She shrugged. It wasn't that loud. Wouldn't bother at all if she could just identify it. But the nights passed, and the strange squeaks and clicks were filed onto other household noises. The motor on the refrigerator, the hum click of the air conditioner kicking in, the sound of shrubs brushing against the side of the house. She'd been living there several months, finally having felt she got a handle on her new roommate, understanding his routines or quirks. Or so she thought until she walked in on him stepping out of the shower. They both froze for half a second, not even breathing. It seemed as if they stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. "Oh my God!" she squealed, unable to get out of the bathroom fast enough, as Clyde covered himself with an opaque curtain. "I'm so sorry," she sputtered. When he came back out, cheeks and ears blushing profusely. "It's fine," he rumbled, eyes trained on the chip in the linoleum. "I thought you'd left for work already. Your truck wasn't here," Fee gave by way of explanation.
Took it at Earl's for tune-up.
He choked out, still not looking at her. Oh, it was her turn to blush, glancing at the calendar. So sorry." He swallowed thickly, shook his head before disappearing into his room. Since then it had been quiet and stilted. Clyde tiptoeing around her feet couldn't stop thinking about it. She knew her roommate was big and tall and wide. He was kind and sweet and almost shy. All in all, it made it very difficult to see him as just her roommate. She'd assumed he was big all over, the tightness of his jeans not exactly hiding everything, but she wasn't prepared for the equipment that she glimpsed hanging between his legs, now that she'd seen him completely bare. She couldn't stop thinking about it, picturing it, wondering. Maybe she had imagined it. Maybe her eyes were playing tricks, or that's what she told herself until Clyde would disappear into his room the moment she'd come home from work. She spent the last several nights imagining her fingers running over his length, letting it drape over her palm. She wondered what it was like when it got hard. Was he much bigger? Would she be able to take him? How would it fit inside of her? How would it feel inside of her? She shivered, wondering if in what other ways he differed. Would it hurt? Would there be discomfort, or would he refuse altogether? Worrying at her lower lip with her teeth, she laid back against her pillows and let herself think about Clyde. It certainly wasn't the first time since she moved in, but she found her curiosity made her urges more insistent. Beyond her new obsession, Fee realised they needed to talk this out face to face. They could be adults about it, if only he'd stop avoiding her. No, she was going to have to take matters into her own hands. She glanced at the kitchen calendar again, their work schedules recorded in neat block writing.
So you can feel comfortable, he said, knowing when I'll be here or not.
So thoughtful, really. It'd been late that night, but off the next day, and she had a day off too. Perfect time to confront him. If it went the way she hoped, maybe they could spend their day together. He yawned and frowned. Perhaps she should nap, set an alarm for when Clyde would get home. She slipped into her room and set both her phone and the clock on the bedside table just in case. She woke up before the alarm went off, but only by a minute, feeling wide awake as she sat up, silencing her alarms before putting on her robe and going to sit out in the living room to wait. As much as he'd been avoiding her, she didn't dare turn on any light except for the one above the sink, something she did on occasion out of courtesy. Her heart raced and her thoughts bounced around in her head. She waited for the telltale sign of his truck pulling up next to the trailer. Her heart pounded in her ears as she heard the crunch of the gravel. Saw the headlights illuminate the room, followed by the squeak of a brake and the slam of a door. She stood feeling antsy and keyed up one foot on the linoleum, the other on the worn carpet. The keys rattled in the door handle, turning before he pushed it open with a grunt, sticking in the frame from the humid summer night. He flipped the switch, overhead fixture bathing them in harsh light. Clyde started, dropping his keys on the floor with a curse.
Christ, Fee,
Scared me, he muttered, bending to pick them up before shutting the door and locking it behind him. We need to talk. She rushed out, stepping closer. He looked at her like a deer in the headlights.
Talk,
he muttered, eyes casting downward. Yes, she said, stepping close enough that he'd have to touch her if he wanted to escape through the galley kitchen to his room. About the other week?
Ain't nothing to talk about,
he said sullen, jaw clenching. I think there's a whole lot to talk about. For one, why have you been avoiding me?
Ain't,
he insisted, looking anywhere but her. You have, Clyde, she said softly. It's beginning to hurt my feelings. His head snapped up for him, his intense study of the crack of the linoleum by his left boot. Chin jerking toward her, he stared at her for a long moment. A tumult of emotions in his eyes. Perhaps she should feel guilty, but it wasn't a manipulation. She really did feel a bit hurt. He thought they were at least friends.
Didn't mean to hurt you,
he finally said with a sigh, his shoulders slumping slightly in defeat. I know, but you did. Why?
Guess I just feel well.
He gestured vaguely at his crotch.
Afraid you'd think I was some kind of freak.
She walked into a space, craning her neck to look up at him. I'm not afraid of you, you know, she commented matter-of-factly, dropping down to her knees without breaking eye contact. He sucked in a breath.
You should be, Fee.
Why? Are you secretly a big, mean man? She asked, tugging purposely at his belt buckle. He shook his head. I mean, if you don't like me, she said with a pout, as she let her palms rest on his thighs. She could feel the heat of his body seeping through the thick denim. He scowled, as if suddenly willing to put up a fight.
Not like you?
He asked her incredulously. She grinned up at him, licking her lips and reaching for his belt again. So, you want me to? His eyes were wide as he hesitated, long dark hair hanging in wavy curtains. He nodded, Fee grinning up at him as she threaded the leather strap through the belt buckle. She made swift work of his button before carefully pulling down his zipper. She sucked in an eager breath, core heating with anticipation as she pulled open his jeans, was reacquainted with the sight of him. She paused, sat back on her heels, a little dazzled by the first look of what she'd only glimpsed at before. She was met with the rainbow colour of his cock, the tip of it practically iridescent the way the colours pooled and shifted in the fluorescent kitchen light. It was a marvel to look at, but she was mindful not to come off as scrutinising. "It's beautiful," she told him, glancing back up to find him looking hesitant, vulnerable. Her fingers wrapped around the coils of his shaft, thickening as she touched them. To her surprise, she found them moist, lubricating as her fingers teased over his length. His expression softened as her other hand reached up to cut his balls. She was only slightly startled by the wheezing, squeaking sigh that absolutely did not come from his mouth. Ah, she had wondered. She pressed gently against his sack again, smiling up at him from her knees, multicoloured light bouncing across her skin. She stared in wonder. "I have never seen anything so lovely as you, Clyde Logan." She glanced back up at him, pressing a kiss to the smooth tip of his dick. It was shaped like an average cock, if not a little long, the texture of the tip smooth and soft, like one of those ergonomic mouse pads from the reference desk. His cock twitched, the spring-like coil thickening further, cock elongating in her hand, forming a sturdier tube than the typical coils formed, lubricating until it was as slick as it was hard. He was so long. His shaft thickening as she took a tentative lick. The natural lubricant on his skin was almost salty. It wasn't sweat, not like that. This was... She licked again, gathering as much as she could and letting it rest on her tongue. Fresh, like tasting a hint of salt in ocean air. Fee pursed her lips and kissed the first coil just below the head of his cock, sucking lightly and then tracing the tiny, rapidly closing gap where it rested hot and heavy against the next coil with the tip of her tongue. Clyde groaned, leaning with a thump against the door, keys dropping to the floor for a second time. She kissed down the base of his shaft, her lips coated in his slick before running the flat of her tongue along the underside of his cock. She groaned, enjoying the taste of him. "Fee," he rasped, prosthetic hanging at his side, right hand hovering in the air by her head. "You can touch me, Clyde. I want you to. Been wanting you to," she said, smiling at him softly, wrapping her lips around the head of his cock. His large hand stroked over her head, fingers threading through the loose strands. Her tongue flicked around the underside of the head, taking him deeper, before teasing between two snug coils. Clyde's fingers flexed against her scalp, his hips jerking forward, pushing his cock further into Fee's mouth. She hummed, stroking her hand over the shaft, her other hand squeezing his balls. Clyde gasped, his balls making that squeaky sound again as her thumb stroked over the right spot. Panting above her, Clyde brushed her hair away from her face to watch her swallow his colourful cock, light splashing colour against his pale skin. Fee bobbed her head, taking him as deep as she could, wondering how he'd feel inside her, while the ridge-like coils bumped over her tongue. She squirmed a little, chasing the ache that was beginning to build between her thighs. She could feel her own arousal gathering, dripping down the inside of her thighs. Despite seemingly being at its full hardness, there was still some flexibility to his cock, possibly due to its spring-like nature, but he was impossibly long. She sucked, testing her ability to take him deeper. his cock practically vibrating the way the ridges ran over her lips. She groaned, his cockhead teasing pressing against the back of her throat, breathed and swallowed deeper, Clyde whimpering above her. She pulled off, stroking the mixture of saliva and his arousal over his length, and made another attempt, the coils of his cock squeezing together as he hit the roof of her mouth like a spring. She hummed, swallowed him down, her fist still bridging the distance between her mouth and the fleshy base. She squeezed his balls. The little gasping squeaks filled the air, slick now with her spit and his own lubrication. "Fee," Clyde growled in warning. She pulled off again, drool dipping down her chin as she grinned coyly up at him. "Close?" she asked, giving the base a firm squeeze, his cock squelching in her hand before stroking him lightly. He gave a shaky nod, his thumb smearing around the mess on her chin. She dipped forward, kissing the underside of his cock, sucking experimentally on one of his balls. The texture of it was smooth against her lips. She opened wide to suck it in her mouth, the stretchy little tendrils tickling her tongue and the roof of her mouth. Clyde groaned, another thunk against the door as he gave in to his pleasure. She swirled the rubbery pubes with her tongue, teeth grazing all over the well-rounded testicle on her retreat. "Fuck," he cussed, a usual mild-mannered roommate catching her by surprise. "Good?" she asked breathlessly, checking in before giving the other one the same treatment. "Yeah," he answered breathlessly. She grinned like a sly cat as she wrapped her lips around the other ball, tongue flicking and teasing. The pressure made it squeak in her mouth, and she chuckled around it as she released it with a pop, giving it an affectionate but gentle nip as she pulled away. He shuddered. She took the opportunity to ramp up his pleasure, resuming licking and sucking his cock, pulling his hips to encourage him to fuck her mouth. "Fee, gonna," he panted. She groaned, stroked the places her mouth couldn't reach, looked up at the man above who looked absolutely wrecked. He began to thrust, rocking his hips haphazardly until he was coming down her throat. It wasn't the bitter brine she expected, rather it was sweet. She sucked it down greedily. His cock pulsed against her tongue, his cum was light, almost foamy, frothy in her mouth. The salty sweet mixture of his arousal was pleasant. She was already eager to suck his cock again. She wondered how it felt in her hands, starting when he was soft, coils thinner, more flexible, perhaps more like a slinky than a spring. Pulling away, she licked her lips and sat back as Clyde stared down at her, wild-eyed and chest-heaving. His hair was mussed and there was a flush on his cheeks and neck. He opened her mouth to say something, although she wasn't quite sure, when she was suddenly hurled up off the floor. "Clyde, what?" He steadied her for half a moment, grabbed the back of her head and pressed his mouth to hers as he backed her further into the trailer. She thought at first he must be taking her to the couch, but then he turned them, kept going until they reached the small breakfast table, his lips and tongue doing things to her mouth she very much enjoyed and rather wanted to feel elsewhere, everywhere. Her bottom hit the edge of the table and he stood very straight, so very tall. Clyde raised his right hand and cupped her chin, thumb on her cheek, fingers resting on her opposite jaw, splayed in her neck. She smiled at him, ready to burst with it, and they leaned in until their noses almost brushed. "Get on the table," he whispered. It felt more like a question, a request. She stretched up on her toes and nodded, reaching back to steady herself. She let out a little yip of surprise when Clyde wrapped his arms around her waist, just picking her up as if it was nothing. She giggled and wrapped her arms around his neck. He leaned over her, bending, following her down as she lay on her back. She only worried about the sturdiness of the table for a moment. When Clyde was kissing her again, nothing else really mattered. They were both breathing hard when he pulled away from her again.
I want to taste you too.
Bea nodded enthusiastically, fumbling from the belt of her robe, not that it was covering much anymore. Still, as Clyde helped her tug the knot free and shrug out of it, he paused.
Knew you stole it.
Bea looked down, following his eyes to her chest. All right, she'd worn his old t-shirt. Partly because it was comfortable and partly in hopes he'd like the idea of it. Her in his clothes. If the way he was looking at was any indication, he liked it very much. The stretched collar hung low, the hem barely grazing the tops of her thighs from the current angle, which meant he could see she hadn't bothered with underwear. Clyde made a low sound in his throat that spoke to the very core of her, made something instinctively sit up and take notice. It was almost a growl, a rumble of possession. He gripped her thigh and pulled, spreading her legs further apart as he sank to his knees.
Scoot forward, Fee.
He half whispered, eyes laser-focused as he licked his lips, slightly red and swollen from kisses. It was easier said than done, but she inched closer, legs draped to either side of him as he knelt there on the kitchen floor. His eyes were dark as they looked up at her, expression mixed in some sort of hungry plea. He kissed the sensitive skin of her inner thigh, beard making her twitch the way it tickled her. He grinned, kissing her again and again, inching his way closer to her core. Fee squirming, her hands pulling the hem of his shirt up so she could palm her breasts, plucking at her nipples. Clyde growled, his hand reaching up to nudge one hand away, the gentle begging boy no longer evident in the feral gaze that met hers, as his hand gently squeezed her breast, the rough calluses of his palm rasping indulgently against her delicate skin. She moaned, arched her back, Clyde taking the opportunity to lick through her aching centre. She sucked in a breath, hovering her feet behind his back, demanding he stay and continue. He gave in to her silent bid, kissing her curl-covered mound before giving another deliberate lick. Fee moaned, eyelids fluttering. He kind of huffed against her a muffled chuckle and did it again. He explored and teased in long, slow strokes of his tongue. The occasional prickle from his moustache or goatee only heightened the sensation as she writhed underneath his ministrations. And then he started talking. A long, slow lick along one side, accentuated by a pause, and then,
tastes so sweet.
Another deliberate, exploratory lick on the other side, and
could do this all day.
A heavy drag of his tongue up her centre, pausing for a teasing dip inside her, then gliding between her folds and away, up to where she throbbed, echoing the deep ache inside.
Want to drink you down, have you for every meal today.
He rocked her hips, trying to get closer to the teasing brush of his lips and facial hair, the caress of breath as he spoke. Clyde! She scrabbled at him, grasping the strands of that glorious hair of his and tugging. He chuckled and returned to his work, pausing every so often to smack his lips together, as if savouring her taste, sometimes grunting against her as she pressed her heels into his back and tugged at his hair. The noise started again, that odd hula hoop, pinwheel, ruffled mini blind sound. She frowned. She hadn't noticed anything when it was in her mouth or hand earlier. What's that?
The sound vibrated through her.
Noise. Oh. She bucked her hips. The table rattled with a warning crack as he lapped at her and then sucked. Oh, she definitely liked that. Clyde steadied the table with his left hand, the prosthetic finger stiff against the wooden surface, and he moaned again. The noise had stopped, not that she cared any longer. What did noises matter? She was making a few noises of her own. Her mouth opened, her eyes rolled back for a moment, His thick, warm fingertips stroked through slick, pooling arousal, pressing gently inside her, slow and steady. The pressure was divine, for a moment soothing the ache that bloomed inside her. Fee squirmed and gasped as the movement changed, something allowing his finger to rub against some spot that made her see shooting stars for a moment. She tried to speak, tried to tell him how it felt, but all she managed was a long, low and another tug on his hair. Clyde seemed to understand at least. The slow drag of his finger back out of her, and then in once more, was divine. She let herself enjoy it, rolling her hips to meet the thrust of one and then two fingers as he licked circles around her clit. His name echoing oddly in the space of the trailer, along with the wet squelch of his fingers thrusting in and out, and his moans muffled against her centre. She tried to be mindful of his hair, not to pull too hard. She threaded her fingers through the strands, scratching lightly at his scalp with blunt nails. His fingers faster, harder. She was close, so close. She gripped his hair again, grazing the top of his ear by accident, and he grunted. She felt the edge of his teeth and nearly screamed. "Shit, sorry," he muttered, pulling away as far as her grip on his hair allowed, stilling the movements. Ears are sensitive. Fee howled. "Felt good, don't stop." She tugged again, dragged him back to her. "Suck," she pleaded, "so close." "You're gonna come for me, Fee." Pretty girl," he muttered, and sealed his mouth back over her, sucking hard and massaging with his tongue as his fingers dropped against her front wall. Fee screamed his name, arched almost violently, nearly sitting up and in real danger of falling off the table as she came hard, entire body shaking, spasming as her inner walls clenched and squeezed around his fingers. Clyde slowed down but worked her through it, his eyes hot and dark with need. He steadied her, made sure she wasn't about to fall, and then watched her and waited. The strange noise started again, but slower, the one she sometimes heard at night. She dimly noted his left arm moving in a slow rhythm which matched the cadence of the sound. She hadn't noticed anything when she was touching him, but then the material of the prosthetic wasn't exactly skin. She blinked up at the ceiling as she returned to earth, breath heavy as if she'd just run a marathon. Looking down at Clyde, who was kneeling between her thighs, she pulled him back up to her, fingers cupped around the nape of his neck. He came willingly, lips brushing over any bit of skin that happened upon his way before reclaiming her mouth. He tasted of her, beard dripping with her arousal as it prickled against her skin. His hand roamed up her ribs, thumb rasping over her nipple. His shirt rocked up to her armpits as he kissed down her neck. She lifted her arms, helped him remove the stolen shirt. He backed up to look at her. She supposed it was only fair. She had already seen him naked. However, she didn't think it was fair that he stood there fully dressed, albeit dishevelled. She hooked her leg around his hip to pull him closer, tugging at the buttons of his shirt. He grunted, unhooking the strap of his prosthetic and sitting in one of the chairs before tugging his shirt over his head. Fee helped, eager to feast on the pale expanse of his chest, broad and muscled. She let her lips press against it, as he was momentarily occupied by the fabric going over his head, nipping where his pectoral flexed from the movement.
You like to use your teeth, he huffed, pulling her flesh against him. His cock sprung up between them, bobbing and swaying a bit. Too much? She asked, cheeks heating as if it admonished her. Never, he said. Might be I even like it. Maybe you should try again. She nipped and sucked a little mark on his chest, enjoying the way he rumbled, his cock twitching where it rested on her thigh. Her hands pushed at his waistband, pulling them down below his arse. Hold on, don't even have my boots off. Well, hurry then, she said with a smack on his bare chest. Bossy, he tutted at her, earning a giggle from her. He bent just enough to untie and kick off his boots, shoving down the jeans before kicking them off. Excuse me. Beg pardon, it's quite late here. Figured I'd better be very clear about what I want, since you're so shy and everything. He stood again, his hand on her hip, fingertips pressed into the flesh of her ass. He kissed her slow and languid, her arms wrapping around his shoulders. He hoisted her up, locking her ankles behind his back as he carried her down the hall to his room. It felt like a claim, bringing her into his space, tumbling into bed with her. She cupped his cheeks, bringing his mouth down to hers as she squirmed beneath him. His hand palmed her breast, and it wasn't long before he was kissing his way down her neck, brushing his lips over one rosy nipple. She shivered, rolling her hips up against his. His cock tracked between them. He grunted, his tongue flicking over the taut bud before pulling it into his mouth. She groaned, her hands guarding through his hair as she held him to her breast, humping at him. Fuck thee. You're gonna make me come again. He whined, grunting against her. Then get up here and fuck me then, she huffed impatiently. He growled, his teeth grazed against the freckled flesh of her breast as he kissed his way back up her body. Bossy, he grumbled. She grinned up at him, capturing his lip between her teeth as she reached for his cock. Unless you want me to ride you? His eyes widened and he nodded, his lips pulling from her mouth as he did. She pushed him on his back, straddling his hips as she slotted her pussy over his cock. You could feel each ridge of him slide over her sensitive and swollen clit. She practically growled, and then she pulled off so she could line up his cock. It was different, pushing down onto his length as it shifted slightly beneath her due to the more flexible nature. She huffed, clenching around him as his cock had slipped past her entrance, his cock filling her much more easily. Her mouth fell open as she descended down his cock, biting her lip as his hand palmed at her breast, his stump resting on her hip. She knew he had taken all of him. She settled against his thighs, his balls squeaking as they pressed against her ass, dim disco lights scattering the room. You feel so good, he panted, his chest heaving beneath where her palms were planted. Her legs were spread wide over his thick hips. She wasn't sure how long she could withstand the strain. You feel good too. So deep, she said as she rocked her hips experimentally. He rolled her nipple between callous fingers, and she found herself lifting herself off and dropping back down as arousal shuttled down her spine. He was so slick inside her body, both of them soaked from their earlier orgasms. Clyde bit his lip, his hand moving to her hip to grip her firmly as she was spurred into a steady rhythm. He helped, his arm and chest flexing deliciously with each move. The room was filled with the sound of his cock fucking her wetly, and his balls squeaking with each descent of her ass onto his lap. Her breathing grew harsh as sweat beaded her brow. Her hair sticking to her temple, her thighs burned, shaking with each press against the mattress. Clyde's brow furrowed as he noticed. His gaze hot, where it met the place they were joined. He took heaving breaths as he rolled his hips, slowly at first, testing her depths, ridges of his cock rubbing delectably. Her hands fisted at the comforter, his thumb finding her clit, rolling over it to make her clench hard around his length. He grunted, pressing harder, fucking her faster, his balls slapping against her ass. Their light making colourful shadows bounce around the room. Tension pulled, coiled, snapped. Soon she was shuddering beneath him, pulling him deep as his hips stuttered. Cum filling her, oozing down her crack. He bent forward, peppering her face with kisses. His fingers pinched her chin, his hips rolled, his cock slicking through the drenched mess. She shivered, her body oversensitive. Each touch, each roll of his hips sending a little flicker of pleasure down her spine. Finally he pulled back, his cock slipping wetly from her body, cum oozing from her down to the mess that was currently soaking into the comforter. Again, he rasped, rolling her onto her side. Again? She murmured, not quite catching on, even as he rolled her onto her stomach, brought her up to her knees. Again? Holy shit, Clyde, she said, clenching around nothing as he gave her rump a little spank. Fuck, he muttered, pressing her shoulder blades and adjusting her position. Love the way you jiggle. Apparently his cock was full of tricks, she thought wryly, as he used his thumb and his hand to pull her cheeks apart. He leaned forward, looking through her core before straightening back up to line his cock up with her entrance. He pressed, his cock not as hard as it had been, bending slightly to rub against the place his fingers had found. Ah! She gasped. Palms pressed into the bed, mouth open wide. It felt different. The weight of it dragging against the front wall sent sparks up her spine. Good? He asked, stilling his body, bending over her body as if she could be anything other than starstruck. Yeah. She gasped, surprised what her answer was. That it was at least a bit coherent. Sure. Fuck yes, she whined, grinding back against him. Move already, she gasped, squeezing her walls around him. He grunted, apparently receiving her message. Yes, ma'am. His first few thrusts were slow, learning the motion of his body in relation to hers. More. I won't break, she encouraged, her fingers curling into the soft comforter. He smacked her ass again, earning a squeal from her. Quit your bossing, he grumbled, but she could hear the smirk that curled his lip. He bent down, propped up with his elbows on either side of her. That okay, darling? She huffed, turning to meet his gaze with her own smile. More than okay, Clyde, she reassured, forgetting he was probably new to this. He kissed her shoulder, breathing in. His chest pressed against her back as he did. He curled his body, wrapping his arm around her, kissing across her shoulders before rearing back onto his heels, his hand sliding down the furrow of her spine. So pretty, darling, he rasped, his hips beginning a slow, rhythmic roll. Even though I'm all sweaty? She asked, a gasping breath punctuating at the end. You're all sweaty because of me, though, he groaned, his hand squeezing her ass before giving it another light smack. She groaned and whimpered as he fucked her, his speed increasing. Their combined arousal made his movements slick, his cock flexing against the inside of her with each thrust, pressing deep, making her see stars. His balls bounced lightly against her clit, and she couldn't resist peeking between her legs to watch as they threw colourful light against her skin. She could feel herself getting close again, her arousal rising, shifting and stretching before cresting over, making her gasp and clench. Clyde grunted when she gasped around him, his fingers flexing at her hip, but its movements increasing, balls slapping wetly against her thighs with enough force with each roll of his hips was punctuated with a squeak and more wild flashes of light. Each thrust ricocheted down her nerves, keeping her keyed up, until finally his cock pulsated inside, filling her with his frothy cum. It was enough to tip her over again, her thighs clamping tight as his hips twitched against her ass, his body curling around hers. His sweat-slicked chest pressed against her back. He pulled out of her, hot cum oozing between her thighs, but she was too blissed out to care. He groaned, burrowed into the bedding, spotting on whatever it was that kept insistently and annoyingly trying to wake her. Come on now, darling. Don't be like that. And it was a hand. Clyde's hand on her back shook her gently from side to side one more time. Just for a minute, Fee. Come on. You're laying in the wet spot. Don't care, she grumbled, eyes stubbornly shut, sprawled on her tummy on a bed that felt heavenly and smelt like Clyde. Now who's being bossy? Well, I care, the annoying man said all annoyingly. It's my bed. I like to change the covers out before it soaks in the mattress. With a huff, she rolled to the side, grimacing as soon as the cool air from the vents touched her clammy skin. He chuckled as she sat up and rubbed at her face. Okay. Fee yawned, and then nodded before slipping off the edge of the bed to stand on the floor. She hissed a bit as she straightened. She couldn't have been asleep for long, but it was at least long enough for the endorphins to fade. She stretched carefully, watched as Clyde stripped the comforter from the bed, patted at the sheets beneath. Good thing about this, it ain't soaked all the way through. Bad thing is, the spread's too big for the washer. I have to take it down next week. Clyde dropped the thick blanket on the floor by the closet door and looked back at Fee. You're sure you're okay? He asked with a frown. Fee nodded. Just a little sore, she admitted, then hurried to add, in a good way, use muscles I haven't in a while. Anything I can do? Remind me to stretch next time? She gripped, watching his eyes widen and his mouth go slack. Next time? She made her way around the bed, giving up trying to look enticing about 2 steps in. Next time, and the time after that, and the time after that, I mean, if you want that too. Blood reached out almost tentatively and pulled her close. I do want that. Good. She hummed, absently pressing a kiss between his pectorals as she wrapped her arms around him and let him tuck her head under his chin. They stayed like that for a long moment, holding one another. Come on, I'll run you back and get some water. You want anything to eat? Think I might make a sandwich. She started to decline and then thought better of it. That sounds good. You're not going to start to be shy again, are you? He glanced at her with an arched brow. I was only shy because I liked you. Didn't want you to be creeped out. He shrugged, turning to walk out into the hall. She followed, shooing him out of the bathroom once he started the water of the bath. It reappeared with her robe, which she appreciated, but didn't keep on long, before they were both trying to fit into the warm water. Finally, Clyde slotting Fee between his thick thighs, her back against his chest. I like this, she said sleepily, his arms wrapped around her. New Saturday night tradition? He asked, sounding hopeful. She nodded, yawning again. You're sleepy. You should get you to bed. Only if you're there too, she muttered. All right, darling. I'll be there too. How did you make something so weird so sweet? This is like, it's such a cute story whilst also being so very weird. Like, it should not be that soft and that lovely, but it is. It's magic. It's an excellent superpower to have. So, yeah, if you're in my time zone, I hope you enjoyed your bedtime stories. We've got like 10 minutes, which is not enough time for anything else. Yeah, I will be back Wednesdays and Saturdays until I'm well enough to record. I hope the fact that I sound like I've swallowed a xylophone. In fact, my voice is off. It has not impaired your listening pleasure too much. And yeah, this will all be up on YouTube in about an hour. So if you're listening on YouTube, thank you very much. Please check out the Ko-fi link if you can, because girls got bills to pay. Much love to everybody. Thank you very much to Dampier and to Jen and to Lyndon for sharing their stories tonight. I really appreciate it. Hope you have an incredible evening. Peace.